He can outrun anyone alive. Only one thing in the world was ever faster than him: time itself. This is the story of the boy who had to wait 12 years for his own dream. Hello, my friend. Come sit with me for a while. Tonight's story is about the fastest man in football, a man so quick that defenders don't even bother turning their heads to watch him disappear, because by the time they would, he's already gone. But this isn't really a story about speed. It's a story about a boy who could outrun almost anything in this world, except the clock and except a dream that refused to arrive on schedule. Some dreams sprint. Others make you wait 12 years at the door before they let you in. This is the story of Kylian Mbappé. A town that had nothing but dreams. Picture a bedroom in Bondy, a working-class suburb just northeast of Paris. Every centimeter of wall space is claimed by one man's face: Cristiano Ronaldo, mid-sprint, mid-celebration, mid-glory. A boy lies on the bed underneath those posters, a ball tucked against his chest like something he's afraid will be taken from him if he lets go. That boy was born on December 20th, 1998, barely 5 months after France had lifted its first ever World Cup trophy, with Zinedine Zidane scoring twice in the final. The whole nation was still hungover on celebration when Kylian arrived. It was, people would later joke, as if football had been waiting for him specifically. His father, Wilfred, had roots in Cameroon. His mother, Faiza, was born in France to an Algerian family, and she herself had been a professional handball player in France's top division. So competitive instinct wasn't something Kylian had to go looking for. It was already in the house. Bondy wasn't a place people pointed to on a map with pride. It was a town built by immigrant families chasing something better. A town the wealthier parts of Paris tended to look past. But Mbappé would grow up to describe it without a trace of shame. In Bondy, he'd say, there wasn't much money, but there were dreams, and dreams, unlike everything else, don't cost anything. His father coached the local youth club, AS Bondy, which meant Kylian effectively grew up on a football pitch the way other kids grow up in a backyard. At 6, he was already too advanced for his own age group, so the coaches simply moved him up to play against 10-year-olds. He remained, somehow, still the best player on the field. One of his early coaches, a man named Antonio Riccardi, who had shepherded hundreds of children through the sport over the years, would later say something he rarely said about anyone. This was the best kid he had ever coached, and probably the best he ever would. There's a story Riccardi liked to tell. AS Bondy is down 1-0 at halftime in a local match. The dressing room is heavy with silence, the kind that settles over a team that already suspects it's beaten. And then this small kid stands up and simply announces, "I'll get the ball and I'll score." No bravado in his voice, just certainty. He went out, did exactly what he said he'd do, and walked off like it had never been in question. He was 10 years old. The scouts arrived. By 11, word had traveled well past Bondy. Real Madrid was watching. Chelsea was watching. Bayern Munich was watching. Nobody in France had produced a talent like this since Zidane himself, and the whisper networks of European football don't stay quiet for long. In late 2012, weeks before his 14th birthday, Real Madrid invited the family to Spain for a private visit to the training ground. They said yes. How do you say no to that? When they arrived, a man was leaning against a car in the parking lot, hands in his pockets, waiting. It was Zidane. The greatest French footballer of his generation had shown up in person to meet a 13-year-old from a suburb nobody outside France could pronounce. Zidane offered him a ride to the pitch. Kylian, paralyzed with nerves, asked the only question his brain could produce: should he take off his shoes before getting in the car? Zidane laughed and told him to just get in. He sat there in near total silence, thinking to himself that this had to be a dream, that he was still asleep somewhere on the plane, and any second now he'd wake up back in Bondy. Zidane gave him a personal tour of the facility, and Kylian watched the first team train before being introduced to the man whose face covered his bedroom walls. When Cristiano Ronaldo posed for a photo beside him, Kylian's smile was the smile of a kid who has just been handed proof that magic is real. Real Madrid made their intentions clear. They wanted him, and they wanted him now. His parents said no. Wilfried and Faisa worried about what it would do to a 13-year-old to be dropped into a dressing room full of the world's biggest stars, thousands of kilometers from home. His mother wanted him to have something resembling a normal childhood a little longer. So Real Madrid, the club he had dreamed about since before he could properly kick a ball, was told to wait. Neither side had any idea that wait would end up meaning 12 years. Monaco, and a record that belonged to a legend. At 13, Kylian left home for the first time to join AS Monaco, a club with a well-earned reputation for turning raw talent into the genuine article. He tore through the youth ranks, 10 goals in his first 5 games at under-19 level, and was fast-tracked to the reserves, then almost immediately to the first team. On December 2, 2015, with Monaco already established in the match, the coach turned to the bench. A slight teenager peeled off his training jacket, number 33 stitched on the back. Mbappé was 16 years and 347 days old, and he had just become the youngest player to ever appear for AS Monaco's first team, breaking a record that belonged to Thierry Henry, one of the great French forwards of any generation. He didn't celebrate the moment the way you might expect. No car, no flashy apartment. Monaco gave him a modest room at the training center, the same kind any young academy player got. Around this time, he said something that stuck with people. A footballer, he pointed out, doesn't rhyme with Ferrari. He didn't own a car. It wasn't, to him, a big deal. Then, Monaco let him loose. Across the 2016-17 season, he scored against Manchester City in the Champions League, against Borussia Dortmund, and finished with 15 league goals as Monaco won their first French title in 17 years and reached the Champions League semifinals. Suddenly, all of Europe wasn't just watching Monaco, they were watching one player in particular. The most expensive teenager in history. In August 2017, Paris Saint-Germain paid roughly 180 million euros to bring him home to the city he'd grown up just outside of. He was 18. It remains one of the most expensive transfers in the sport's history for a player who, by his own account, still didn't want a car. The following summer, the World Cup arrived in Russia, and a 19-year-old Mbappe was the youngest starter in the French squad. France's first real examination came in the round of 16 against an Argentina side built around Lionel Messi. What followed on June 30, 2018 is remembered as one of the great World Cup knockout matches ever played. 7 goals, end-to-end chaos, and a teenager who simply would not stop running. In the 13th minute, Mbappe collected the ball in his own half and drove 60 meters forward, brushing off one defender, then another, until the only way to stop him was to foul him. Penalty converted. France 1-0. Argentina clawed back to lead 2-1 before France equalized, and then Mbappe took the game to the throat. In the 64th minute, he slotted a low finish under the goalkeeper. 4 minutes later, he was in behind again, this time lifting the ball high into the net before the keeper could react. France 4-2. Argentina pulled one back too late. Final score 4-3. Mbappe had become only the second teenager in World Cup history to score twice in a knockout match. The first had been Pelé in 1958. When reporters brought that comparison to him, he brushed it off with more humility than most 19-year-olds could manage. Flattering, he said, but Pelé belongs in an entirely different category. France went on to beat Uruguay, then Belgium, and met Croatia in the final on July 15, 2018 in Moscow. With France leading 3-1 in the 65th minute and Croatia still pressing, the ball found Mbappe 20 meters from goal. No backswing, barely a pause. His shot skimmed low across the wet grass, past the diving keeper, into the corner. 4-1. The match finished 4-2. At 19 years old, Kylian Mbappé was a World Cup champion and the first teenager to score in a World Cup final since Pelé 60 years earlier. The next day, Pelé himself sent a one-line message: "Welcome to the club." What Mbappé did next surprised people almost as much as the goals had. Every member of the French squad received performance and victory bonuses from the World Cup, in his case, somewhere around $500,000. He gave every cent of it to a French charity that helps children with illnesses and disabilities access sport. When asked why, his reasoning was almost disarmingly simple. He hadn't needed to be paid to wear the colors of his country. Faster than almost anyone alive. To understand what set Mbappé apart from other elite forwards, you have to understand what his acceleration actually looked like on a pitch. In 2019, playing PSG against his former club Monaco, he collected the ball near the halfway line, beat two defenders, and finished from inside the box. His GPS tracker clocked his top speed on that run at 38 kilometers per hour. For context, Usain Bolt, the fastest human being ever recorded, tops out around 44 kilometers per hour in a straight line, with no ball, no defenders, no decisions to make. Mbappe was doing nearly that speed while controlling possession, reading the defense, and calculating a finish, all at once. At PSG, that combination made him close to unplayable. He would go on to become the club's all-time leading scorer, passing 250 goals in a Paris Saint-Germain shirt. But even a man who could outrun almost anyone on the planet couldn't outrun the calendar. And the biggest test of his career, and the deepest heartbreak, was still coming. 3 goals and still not enough. December 18, 2022. Lusail Stadium, Qatar. The World Cup final. France against Argentina. Mbappe against Messi. 2 PSG teammates on opposite sides of the biggest match either of them would ever play. The first half belonged entirely to Argentina. A penalty, then a sweeping counterattack. 2-0 at the break, and Mbappe barely in the game, with a single touch inside the Argentine box across the first 70 minutes. Commentators were already writing Messi's coronation. Then, in the 80th minute, everything turned. France won a penalty. Mbappe stepped up and sent the keeper the wrong way. 2-1. 97 seconds later, barely enough time to breathe, a pass reached him on the edge of the box, and from an almost impossible angle, falling backward, he lashed the volley into the far corner. 2-2. The stadium detonated. France had returned from the dead in under 2 minutes, and for the first time all tournament, Argentina looked rattled. Extra time. Messi restored Argentina's lead, 3-2, and with seconds ticking away, the trophy seemed to be sliding out of France's reach. But Mbappe wasn't finished. In the 118th minute, another penalty. Same walk-up, same composure, same finish, same corner. 3-3. 3 goals in a World Cup final, a feat achieved by only one other man in the previous 56 years, Geoff Hurst for England in 1966. The match went to penalties. Mbappe converted his, but Argentina held their nerve to the last kick, and the trophy went to Messi. The lasting image of that night wasn't the Argentine celebration. It was Mbappe, alone on the bench, his shirt pulled over his face. He had scored a hat-trick in a World Cup final, won the tournament's Golden Boot with 8 goals, and he had still lost. It's a strange kind of lesson, learning at 23 that you can do absolutely everything right and still walk away with nothing. The wait. Here is the strange irony sitting at the center of Mbappe's career. The fastest footballer alive spent 7 years waiting for Real Madrid. In 2017, he chose PSG instead. Real Madrid stayed patient. In 2021, they offered close to 200 million euros. PSG didn't even respond. Then came 2022, his contract running down, and the entire footballing world, including reportedly Mbappe himself at points, assumed a move to Madrid was finally happening. Journalists had the headlines half written. At the last moment, he changed course and re-signed with PSG. Inside his own family, the decision had reportedly split opinion. Accounts at the time described his mother favoring Madrid and his father favoring Paris, with Kylian caught between two people he trusted most. Real Madrid's leadership felt publicly humiliated by how the saga had played out, and some in Madrid openly suggested the club simply move on. Back in Bondy, the mood soured too. A mural of Mbappe that the neighborhood had painted years earlier, the boy on the bed, the ball against his chest, the dream above him, was vandalized. Someone scrawled 4 words across his painted face: "Mbappe, you're dead." Newspapers ran with narratives about a player who couldn't make up his mind. For a stretch, the fastest man in football found that, in fact, he could not outrun the consequences of a decision. Then in the summer of 2024, his PSG contract finally expired, and this time there was no last-minute reversal. Real Madrid announced what had been 12 years in the making. Mbappe wrote to the world that it was a dream come true, that he could barely believe how it felt to finally be joining the club he'd wanted since he was a boy standing nervously in a Real Madrid parking lot, asking Zidane if he needed to take his shoes off. Wearing the number. He arrived not as a visiting 13-year-old this time, but as a player, and was handed the number 9, the same shirt Ronaldo had worn in his first Real Madrid season, the same Ronaldo whose posters had covered every inch of that bedroom in Bondy. His first season delivered on more than a decade of anticipation. 43 goals across all competitions, top scorer in La Liga, top scorer across Europe alone. He scored 59 goals for the club across the 2025 calendar year alone, matching a mark Ronaldo himself had once set. The dream hadn't just arrived, it was thriving. The 2026 World Cup still writing itself. This next chapter is being written in real time, my friend. As of today, the tournament is still going, so some of what follows may already be old news by the time you're watching. The 2026 World Cup, hosted jointly across the United States, Mexico, and Canada, arrived with Mbappe as France's captain, the armband now his following the international captain's traditional path in French football. Early on, the tournament was shadowed by real grief. Head coach Didier Deschamps learned in the middle of the group stage that his mother had passed away. He briefly left the squad to be with his family, missing a match, before returning to the sideline determined to finish the job. On June 30th, in the round of 32, France faced Sweden. Mbappe was central to a comfortable 3-0 win, and by full-time, he made a point of finding Deschamps first, wrapping him in an embrace in front of the cameras, a quiet acknowledgement in the middle of a tournament of everything the coach had been carrying off the pitch. France advanced past Paraguay 1-0 in the round of 16, Mbappe converting from the penalty spot, a goal that also drew him level with Messi at the top of the tournament's scoring charts. Both men locked at 7, then 8 goals apiece as the competition wore on. It extended a personal record too, more career World Cup knockout stage goals than any player in the tournament's history. Then came the quarterfinal against Morocco, a rematch of their 2022 semifinal,
France winning again 2-0, Mbappe scoring and setting up a second for Ousmane Dembélé, even after missing a penalty earlier in the match. He limped off late with ice strapped to his ankle, but returned for the celebrations, and there was no serious concern over his fitness heading into the Final Four. As it stands right now, France sits at the top of FIFA's world rankings, alongside Argentina, Spain, and England, as the last 4 teams left in the tournament, the first time in World Cup history that the semifinals have been contested entirely by the pre-tournament top 4. France plays Spain in the semifinal, with the final scheduled for July 19th at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Whether Mbappe lifts the trophy this time or falls just short again the way he did in Qatar is a chapter nobody, including him, can write yet. But one thing about him is already beyond argument. He is the greatest goalscorer French football has ever produced, at any World Cup, in any era. And he's still running. Today, back in Bondy, on the side of an apartment block, there's still a mural. A young boy lying on a bed, hugging a football, dreaming. Above him, rising like something conjured out of that dream, is the same boy grown into a man, wearing the number 10 of France. Underneath, one line in French: "Love your dream, and it will love you back." 20 years ago, a boy covered his walls with someone else's face, hoping to become something close to it one day. Now other boys in other bedrooms are doing the same thing with his. The fastest man in football learns something that no amount of speed could teach him. Some things you cannot sprint toward. You can only run as hard as you are able, and then you have to wait. Sometimes for years, sometimes past the point where waiting feels bearable, for the door to finally open. So run when you are able to run, and when you can't, wait. Dreams, it turns out, are patient. They know their way home eventually. Thanks for spending this time with me. Until next time, take care of yourself.